Okay, everyone, welcome to the webinar. My name is Daniel Kaplan, and I'm going to be walking you through our email template best practices webinar today. Thanks so much for joining. We at What Counts take a lot of pride in helping customers achieve the best they can in their email marketing, and one of the core principles here is that email template design and best practices for that. So I want to take some time today to kind of walk you through our process a little bit, some things that you should be looking for in your own email templates, things that you can take out of this webinar and hopefully apply to your email marketing, whether you are a What Counts customer or not. These are things that every email marketer should be looking at. We'll also show you some examples of how we've applied this to some client work and some tools that we use internally that you may be able to in your own workflow and work experience. We will not be having audio on. You will be able to comment, though, and we'll save those comments and questions for the end. Assisting me on this call today is Ben Smith, and he'll be curating those questions as we get to the end of the webinar. So chime in with questions, type them into the chat box, and we'll go from there. All right, so let's just jump right in, shall we, guys? The reason why we want to talk about email optimization, the benefits, really goes to the changes that have happened over the past several years. We all know we check email more on our mobile device than we even do on our desktop. And that has changed the way people have to design and code their email templates. We have also just changed the way we digest media and content. So making sure you can engage with your subscribers, get that attention, and gain the click is really critical. So we tend to think about how do we optimize our template to get to the inbox, respond really well on any type of device, and consider where the users will be engaging with that content. Knowing how do we measure that success? Is it the open rate? Is it the click-through rate? How is it changing our engagement once they click through? So think about those things as you're trying to optimize your template. We're going to cover these key areas as we go through today. So while we go through this list, some of these topics or these headings may not be 100% clear to you yet, but I promise we'll cover each and every one of these bullets on the screen. The key thing that I want you to take away here is it has to work everywhere. It has to look great everywhere. And we'll spend a good amount of time after we go through these bullets talking about utilizing modular design and why that will help you in scaling your email program and releasing beautiful emails with limited amount of upkeep and allowing you to scale your email program. So one of the first things that people tend to maybe ignore, but something that really helps drive that open rate and helps set up expectation for your customers or your subscribers is a pre-header text. We always recommend including a custom pre-header. This is that little teaser copy that you see at the very top of the email. And if you see on the right here, we've done a mock-up of what it would look like on your iPhone. You have, of course, the sender and the subject line, but there's that follow-up copy. If you don't have pre-header text, often that can be showing copy that doesn't necessarily make sense. We want to write pre-header copy specific to the email, and you want to make sure you're trying to pull them into whatever that creative is. Consider it more of an extension of what you're sharing within that subject line. That does help drive that engagement, and it sets your customers up to know what the email is really about. Some best practice, though, is to keep that copy pretty limited, 50, 75 characters tops. And again, make it unique to each message. Remember, it's that extension and pulling them into the email. So you want to consider how that's going to look and how that's going to render. When we design the template, you're also going to consider how that's going to render in the top of that email. Often we see people try to overstuff their top navigation. We recommend you do have a top navigation, but try to remember that your email is going to show up in most places on a desktop at about 600 pixels wide. So you don't want to overstuff that navigation with too many links. Highlight on the links that really are the most engaging pieces of content on your website. 3 or 4 links usually cuts it right there. And for example, if you're in e-commerce, you're going to pick your top 3 or 4 categories that have the most traffic and the most volume and the most need. The goal there is obviously to provide your customers quick access to deep links into your site that may not be exactly the content in the email, but we don't want them to have to go digging. Email is great to drive that information, but we really want to drive the click-through. So let's make it easy for those subscribers to get to the content they're looking for. Some customers don't want to put a top navigation. That's totally cool. We'll show you some examples of both as we go through this presentation. But consider how your business is operating. Maybe you're in media and publishing, and there's core content areas of your website that you're constantly seeing your customers go to. Make that easy for them to navigate, even if the content below is different. It does not need to mirror the navigation of your site, though. Remember that. You may have a very large menu structure on your website. Narrow that down to just a few of the key links. Imagery is super, super important, and there's wonderful places online to find images. We have found that having content pairing it with relevant images really drives more views. This is now a visual medium. Email is so much about pulling your customers through. So think about these categories and think about the type of imagery. As you can see in these examples, they're really engaging in the right colors, there's smiles, you're being pulled into the story. Try to match those images to your campaigns that will pull them into your story and what's happening within your business. Really think about the colors, think about that content. The ratio is going to be important here, and we'll show you some hierarchy examples as well. But find those stock images if you don't have them in your library. We're going to show you some sizing things as well to consider when you're uploading your images. So I mentioned on the previous slide about hierarchy, and this is a pretty good example, as you can see on the right, more of a weak hierarchy. Text-based only, we really don't know where our eye is supposed to go. What's the priority as I go through the email? We really want to build a strong visual hierarchy as I flow down that page. Your core message at the top, big, bold, and straightforward. We'll talk about CTAs in a second, but move the eye down, create some clear visual breaks between the different sections of your email to make sure your reader knows exactly what they're looking for as they scan through that message, and they find the different modules, the different pieces of content clearly defined throughout the flow of that email template. Now, I mentioned CTA, and actually this is probably one of the best things for you to be able to test and one of the best things for you to implement. Often we see customers that are just putting links in their emails and not call to action buttons. Break up the monotony of your email by making a clear call to action and make sure that button is coded as what we call bulletproof. That means it will render great no matter whether images load or not. There's fallbacks for it. As you guys have probably run into, sometimes emails don't look the same across different ways you're viewing it. It's going to look different on your Android device than on your iPhone, than in Outlook. While we have what counts code to work in 40-plus different ways and different renderings and different fallbacks, it's important that your buttons are coded in a way they're going to look great everywhere. Some other key things to consider is, what is the text on those buttons? How are you making that engaging? Keep it action-oriented. Here's some good examples. Read more, register now. The call to action should pull them through to your content. Remember, emails to get their attention, to wet their whistle, but we want to drive them through in most cases to engage in a higher level with you and your brand. So leave a bit there. Pull them into that with your copy and with your CTA. Other things to consider is the color scheme on that button, and that's a great thing to test. Really easy to change out the button color. See which is going to drive more engagement for your customers, but do a contrasting color, something that will match the color scheme of your email and your brand, but really stand out in the body of that email to drive that CTA. So social. This is an interesting one. In what counts, we have some ability and some tools that will allow you to quickly share that content just with the click of a button and embed those links. But the other aspect of social is really painting that ecosystem between you and the different touch points that your customers have. Email is still the highest performing of all channels for marketing. You get a higher ROI and higher engagement from email than any other channel. But obviously, we want to make sure that your customers can reach you and engage with you wherever it makes sense. Perhaps you have a new Facebook group You want to make sure you're calling that out and linking to it in the right way. Your Instagram stories are really taking off, so you want to make sure you make these available. We recommend building a module that actually houses your social links. We'll show you how we do that in some of our templates. And also think about which content and which emails you want to make that content directly shareable from your email. So consider that as you build out your content strategy. So as we're working our way down the email and we've kind of broken up our content and made that hierarchy, you have one last area before the footer, or maybe even in the footer, where you can recover your customers again to click through. It might be a recap of that top menu structure, or it might be some quick navigation links related to the other key areas of your business that may not have been spoken to in the email. Think about that last area to capture that click and make it easy for your readers to engage with that content. And of course, you want to make sure your footer is engaging, has all the relevant information that is necessary to get them where they need to go. So that covers a lot of the basic elements of the email itself. Some behavioral considerations that we want you to think about as you're testing and looking at your emails. You're looking at them on desktop and mobile. Make sure you're looking at how these things are rendering the from name, the subject line, that pre-header text. How does it look different on these different devices? Have you tested to see how it looks when the images are off? If you're on an iPhone, those are going to load all the time, but there's going to be different experiences based on the different ways your customers are viewing your emails. Make sure they still look great even if images are off. We always recommend now thinking of mobile first in our designs, and far too often customers are only looking at the desktop version. We're going to show you some tools that we use to mock things up and to show both responsive design for desktop and mobile. But make sure you're thinking about that mobile experience first, not just for desktop. We talked about the calls to action and making them clear. We've talked about the bulletproof buttons and making sure that's part of your coding methodology. One other thing to consider is creating that visual hierarchy with space, using white space as your advantage, creating some gaps or some breathing room so the eye moves through the design as you flow down the page. So those are some high-level things to consider. And of course, we will be making this presentation available after the webinar. So as you look through your emails, compare and contrast how you're doing and performing in these key areas. So next thing that we can kind of jump into a little bit is the design process itself. And this is our methodology and the terminology that I was using earlier is called modular design. This is going to allow you to create a standardized template that you can use across all your communications. The key to really is really building blocks. As I look at this example here, the main things that I want you guys to notice first and foremost is a pre-header module, the header module, and the footer module. Those should be consistent across all your communications. Once we build the framework, or you've defined the framework for your emails, every message to your customers should have a consistent look and feel. Once you've defined that pre-header formula, that header formula, and that footer formula, you can insert body modules and restack them or move them around to support your marketing message. We'll kind of go into this in a little bit more detail, but let's unify the design elements so your template has a cohesive look. Start with that experience, and then all the other iterations will follow the same formula. So we'll show you some examples of that. And the key is these are blocks that can be moved, arranged, deleted, copied, cloned. Make those body modules flexible for you. So where do we go from here? Well, let's kind of think about a wire. So here's an example of a wire that we could be discussing with a customer. As you look at all your content needs and you start building out the blocks, you're going to need to consider the variety of different types of content you're going to want to send. As I look at these blocks, though, the goal is to be able to copy them, recycle them, reorder them as I go through this experience. So this is just an example of a pretty clean wire with, we have our hero image, our feature. This is the main CTA that we're looking to drive with the email potentially. We need to create some section header modules. Maybe we want an image right, perhaps an image left, so we can get an S-curve and the eye is going to move down the page really cleanly. Often we're going to want to show stuff to across. Here's an example of what that may look like, or possibly content that needs to be a 3 across with different CTAs. These are just examples of how you can start building your wires. Maybe an alternate section breaker, and then you get your footer, maybe with your social links, your navigation links, and your address. So this is a fairly straightforward wire example. A little secret tool that we have at What Counts is actually we built our own internal wiring tool. So this really helps us when we consult with customers, and we're happy to help you guys if you're interested, where I can go in and look at some predefined pre-headers and start building out this email experience from a wire perspective. Maybe I want to look at what my header options are, and in this case we want to do something pretty straightforward with a logo and some navigation links. And maybe this footer over here gives me a little bit more of what I'm looking for. And we can start going through and building out body modules and seeing what makes sense after we've actually evaluated that content. So it's a really good exercise. You guys may not have access to a tool like this. This is an internal tool. But you do have something directly inside of What Counts, if you're a What Counts customer, that can replicate some of this experience on a limited basis. Obviously, you can always sit down with a designer and have them mock these things up for you. But those are the things you're going to want to start looking at and thinking about your content pieces. How would you do this inside of What Counts? Well, we would probably want you guys to go in and try our drag and drop editor. If you're inside your What Counts experience, and let's hope we didn't get logged out. Let's see. All right, we're still in. You're going to be able to go into your creative library, which is under content. And in my example, I have many different modules available, but let's just use, for example, the minimal theme. From here, you can go ahead and create what's called a layout. And that layout is basically a wiring tool that you can customize with your own pieces. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of one and how you would actually use this to wire out your content. The code's already in behind the scenes here, so it will be mobile responsive and beautiful. And in this wiring tool, as I go through and I decide what content do I need for my email, I can simply add, remove, or delete pieces. Maybe I don't want this section header, so I can remove it. Maybe I decided that I only need one module for image left, and I don't want an image right module. I can remove that module as well. But I'm going to need 2 of these sections, of these 3 across sections, to support my content. I can clone that and have these stacked pieces of content. So very quickly you can kind of go through and select your things from the left or right and move in different content blocks, rearrange your content, and create your own wire. Once you're happy with that, you can save it. And now that will be available for you as a layout, which you can always copy, clone, and use in a variety of ways. Now, it's fairly limited in terms of number of modules on the left, but this is a great place to start, and certainly super easy for you to go in and build a beautiful responsive email without having to touch the code one bit. In this drag and drop editor, we do have features like color pickers, where you can just drag your color and change button colors really easily. Simply edit to switch out content, change content, just like in a WYSIWYG, and it's really easy to use. So let's move on and show some other options for you guys as well. So now we've kind of built out a wire, we've considered out all the different content that we need, and in order to do that, we've probably had to look at the content needs across the board. The good thing about a modular design is as you go through your process, you've made your header and footer experience. If you just determine you need another module, those are fairly quick and easy to code up or to find, to work through is adding a new module to your template. So you're already 90% there, even if you're missing a few modules. All right, so we've got our wire here. How does this actually play out in the real world? We worked recently with Salisbury University and kind of took a look at 5 different emails of theirs, and we applied the same principle of modular design. As you can see on the right, we added a pervasive header and footer experience that you'll see throughout these emails. We took the content they had in their emails, but we repurposed it into this stackable modular design and created the hierarchy with the CTA buttons. So here would be email 1, took another email on the left. They were disparate in terms of how those messages were communicated. We standardized that. Here's an application driving that to schedule a visit versus just simply having it text on the left, and making sure we were driving for that activity on page. Again, we're focusing on the campus visit or registration process and driving them further into that, but also making sure the instructions were super clear and creating a hierarchy there. But you see the same style, this header, this masterful, beautiful picture at the top. The reader subscriber knows what to expect as they're reading through these emails. And we've applied that pre-header text and that pervasive header and footer experience in content blocks. And here would be email 5. So very easy now to update and add new content simply with a new image, maybe some copy changes, but all the default pieces are there so these people can scale very quickly and provide new content very quickly without having to touch the code. Some other examples to consider. Here's something we recently did for Humana for My Wellbeing. In that particular need, the 4 tenets of that business are health, money, people, and play. So we made sure to make sure that was clear at the top of the email. And we did a variety of exercises regarding how to prioritize the content. As I scroll down the page, I'll try to go slow since GoToMeeting may need some time to catch up. We do a lot of different attention to the headline treatments and how do you prioritize that content. So we have different aspects to headline and subheadline and CTA, different calls to action like this exclamation point to make your eye flow left to right. Also some different titling options and how to, again, reprioritize the content throughout the email. But we still went with some of these standard pieces you need, an image left, CTA right, an image right, CTA left, a to across option, and we can go on and on. The key, though, is when we made this design, it was very important we considered mobile. And again, everything stacks beautifully, and we tested this across all those different types of devices. Another example would be for our friends over at Game of War. And this email is really all about engagement, right? We want to pull as many people into the game as possible. The email is to drive those customers back into the game, so you'll see the CTAs drive directly back into the game. This is an example without a top menu structure. That wasn't really necessary. It's all about engagement within the game specifically. But again, building these options in this hierarchy, one of the other things that's critical for this, we also broke up the modules into their components, an image-only module. Maybe you just want to have a graphic and not text in a CTA, so consider that, how to support that. Maybe you just need a title. Maybe you just need a piece of text. Perhaps you need some type of table to show off that content. These are the things you need to consider and as you build out your module library. Maybe you just need a CTA button. Of course, social is super important for a customer like this, engaging in any way, shape, or form. Creating that social share or social follow module that can be placed anywhere within the email. And we thought about footer experiences. Do we want to cross-sell another game or not? Creating options to make that easy to turn to. Again, mobile first, and it looks great in that experience and stacks the content beautifully. Here's another experience for a media and publishing experience, working with the folks at Hot Rod Network. We really just wanted to look at how could we repurpose and make sure we had a great responsive experience. This is all about video and driving to video. These were the key, most important pieces of the discovery with the customer. And they have beautiful imagery and great descriptions. We went with a really straightforward, clear breakup of the content. Notice these spaces we built between each of these sections to really make each of the content pieces stand out and driving you to read more. And as we thought about the recapture zone, as there are opportunities for cross-sell to drive to the store or to sign up for memberships, and also to discover other publications and other things within the network. So we really mastered that footer, made sure that's clear, and had those social links right in there for that cross-sell as we discussed in the best practice. And how does it look on mobile? It looks awesome. So those are just a few examples of how you can apply these principles to your email template design. And we hope this helps you guys in really getting there. The other thing that we just want you to consider is how are you testing? I mentioned one option, which is testing button color. That would be great. The other things you can test is, of course, your subject line, your pre-header text. Try testing the different orders of your modules and prioritizing differently. Try testing the CTA text and what you're actually placing on that button. But when you're testing, make sure you allow enough time and enough statistically relevant click-throughs or opens to actually determine a winner. So you want to test one feature at a time or one change at a time and actually have a true A/B test. If you try to test too many changes at one time, sometimes it can skew your results. You're not sure what actually drove better results. So consider that. So that gets us to the end. I'm imagining there may be some questions. There's a lot of content we covered here. As I mentioned, we would be able to provide this to you guys. And after this, we're going to send you a recap of this presentation, especially the first half that shows you those things to look at in your templates. But Ben, do we have any questions that we want to answer right now?
We do. Question number 1, is the pre-header text the same as the top offer?
Well, actually, the thing about the pre-header text is it's text-based only. It can often be relevant to the first piece of content in your email. You do want to pull them in. So imagine as an extension of your subject line. It may or may not be. Often it is, but often you have a lot of opportunity to be a little bit more creative with your language and show off your personality and then pull them in with the image once they open the email.
All right, this next question was more design-based, so I reached out to one of our designers and got him to answer it. So the question was, do drawings/illustrations perform as well as, better, or worse than photos? And his response was, if you run a lifestyle brand, then photography will trump illustration, though it's hard to say as one size doesn't fit all. And then he emphasized that you should always be testing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So if you're, in our experience, right, we have a software company here. We often like to show off the software, but we also try to be a bit more of a lifestyle brand in the what counts approach. And we find to test both of those things is helpful. It really does depend on the brand message. Obviously, stock images can always be a fallback. If you have a great design aesthetic and you're selling a story, you want to pull that story through. Great points.
Okay, we got another pre-header question. Do you recommend the pre-header text to be clickable?
We do, yeah.
All right. What are your thoughts on having share to social buttons versus social icons that link to your brand's social pages?
So, again, it depends on the content. An example where you may want to share that socially, maybe it's someone won an award or they were given something and you want them to push that out to their social networks. You want to think about what that content specifically is. That would determine how you want to apply social. We absolutely still recommend having the links to social be available most likely in that footer or in a specialized module that you can add to your content. Obviously to expose your network and connect in as many different places as possible. But think about the content specifically and if it's shareable, if it's something that would make a lot of sense for someone, they would feel compelled to share that information. It may work well with articles or videos and media and publishing specifically to allow them to share that directly from the email. Or again, if it's something that they would be proud to share that affects them. Maybe it's a contest, for example, and you want them to use that experience to pull them into the contest. That might be helpful as well.
Okay. In the module with 3 columns, can you easily change that to 2 columns?
We would have you have you're talking about in our free drag and drop experience in What Counts. We would recommend having a separate module for 2 across. To respect the responsive design. It's been coded in that way to stack properly with the 3 modules. You may go into the editor and try to speed it out, but it may not suffice. If that's an interest for you and you are a What Counts customer, just reach out to your customer success manager and we can see if we can help you.
Okay.
We do obviously offer full custom templates, and the ones that we showed you in the example, those all work in the drag and drop editor for our customers. We've gone ahead and created all the modules they need, broken up by sections and in that same type of editor with all their content already preloaded.
Okay. What have you learned about depth or length of the email? How far down will people scroll or browse down in an email? Is too long of a scroll bad?
Great question. I would say that in the majority of the case, we're all used to scrolling now, especially on mobile. We're used to doing that. Now, that being the case, how do you prioritize your content? Now, Costco, when they send an email, it is massively long, and all the analytics that we've seen don't change. Like people scroll through that whole email because they like that content. So you just have to think about your customers and where they are clicking and how they're clicking and measuring that. When you start getting to, on average though, more than 5 or 6 pieces of content, think about how relevant that content is. Really make sure you're prioritizing.
All right, great. That's all the covers that will questions that we'll cover here. There are a few more that are a little more heavy-handed on the design aspect of things that we'll actually answer offline, and we will send those out to people.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for participating today. Again, we'll make this presentation available for download to all you guys, and feel free to reach out to us directly. Send any questions to marketing@whatcounts.com, and we can certainly follow up with you. Or if you're a current customer, feel free to reach out directly to your customer success manager, and they'll be happy to help you. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks.